Now, as most of you know, when we start our summer concert series, songs, we start it, and you don't necessarily may not recognize who it is, but that one was like on the screen. Did you actually read the screen? Do you know what that song is? Has anybody heard of it other than the one who submitted it? All right, so who is it? Yeah, so it's here it's not just Ray Charles, as you can recognize maybe. This is the Ray Charles Singers. So the Ray Charles Singers are different than just Ray Charles. So Ray Charles is, yes, a part of that, but it's not, as you can hear in there, there's a whole bunch, and they actually called themselves the Ray Charles Singers because they were actually trying to be able to take from there. So, kind of build on this whole Ray Charles as he was, pretty popular. So this was 1964, and the album was called Something Special for Young Lovers. Now that's kind of the range on which we find ourselves in today was 1964. Now Jim, he always brings us some of the oldies. So far, this is your third year of picking a song and finding it in the mix, right? Yeah. So Jim submitted it this year, and so really what I say, here's the key lyrics that I talk about in this passage is where he says, "Love me with all your heart, love me with all your heart, or not at all." Now I know that these lyrics were not intended for us to be able to talk about a spiritual message. This was meant for one person singing to another person and saying, "I want you to love me, and I want you to love me with all your heart, or not at all." Like either love me or don't love me. And there was like the call, like it's this kind of back and forth. Why do we recognize this? Because later on it says, "with all of your kisses." So it's like, that's kind of where we're saying, all right, so God doesn't say he's going to love us with all of his kisses, right? Or he doesn't say for us to love God with all of our kisses. So that's where we understand that the lyrics are not necessarily meant for the church or the people, but it's meant for, as you can see by the name of the album, young lovers. So as we see this, and as you can put together that we just talked about the two scripture readings, one from the old, one from the new, same scripture passage ultimately. So here's the question to start with today. Is loving God an option? This is a tricky question. Is loving God an option? Right. No, yes, no. We had a mixed reaction. And you're saying it depends, right? If you're a follower of Jesus, is loving God an option? No. If you're not a follower of Jesus, is loving God an option? Yes. And see, that's where it comes in, where you're saying, that's why I like that there was a mix. I'm glad somebody wasn't just like, no, it's not an option. And then we're like, but wait a second, it is an option if you're not a follower of Jesus. Like, no, there's no command upon your life to be able to love God. But if you are a follower of Jesus, we're going to get into that this isn't I wonder if I should. Same question laid before you, is loving people an option? Loving others, loving one another, is it an option? What? Right, and that's where we get back to the same thing. Not if you're a follower. If you're not following Jesus, this is an option for you. It's an option. So you're like, I don't necessarily have to love God or people. It's an option for me. And this option, you can say, well, it looks like I'm going to love the people who love me, and I'm not going to love the people who don't love me. That's an easy one, isn't it? This is the same thing Jesus said in the Gospels. He said to us, he said, why is it that we want to say, oh, let's repay somebody good for good? That means that everybody does that. That's the way of the world. That's what he's like. People do that all the time. Like, this is a known thing. If you were invited over for dinner, you better be able to respond by saying, hey, next week you're invited to my house. That was an expectation. It wasn't like, I wonder if that'll happen. It was an expectation. You repay good for good. So the same thing on the other side. We repay evil for evil. We seek out revenge. And see, that's the common, right? That's the given. Jesus says we love God and we love people. Now, does Jesus tell us, that we're going to get into even before we get there, does Jesus say which kind of people we should love? No. He doesn't give us a select group. He doesn't say, hey, just love the people who love you. No. All right. I'm just going to clear that up before we get moving. So Deuteronomy, we're going to look at the first passage first, and we're going to try to understand where is this coming from. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Moses is speaking. This is the part of Deuteronomy, this is towards, like, Moses is getting ready to be able to try to take the people into the promised land. What we know, what Moses didn't know at the time, was that he wasn't going to be going. Moses never entered the promised land. Did you know that? All right, just making sure. Moses never entered, but what God did give to Moses was the view of the promised land. He took him to a high mountain, and he said, hey, Moses, there's the promised land. You're not going, but it's cool. The people are going to have a good time eventually. So when we get into this part, you're thinking about what Moses is old at this point in time, but he's trying to teach people the most important things as he's laying it out for them. Deuteronomy 6, I'm going to do 4 and 5. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord alone. Right? So there's God, one God. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Right? So that's what it is. So if you look back, Deuteronomy chapter 5 is where Moses is telling the people, let me just give you a summation of what the law looks like, what the commands of God are upon your life. So he goes through the whole thing. Can you imagine that sermon? See, like you thought I preach long, that I talk long? Nope. Moses goes through the entire law and the commands, and they just sit there and listen to them, and they're like, yes, Moses, this sounds good. We're up for that. I mean, they always agree to things that they're actually never up for. Have you ever noticed that too? Like they're actually saying, like multiple times in scripture, like, yes, we're going to do exactly what you said. We're all on board. And then it's like the next moment they go and do the opposite. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5 then is kind of the summation. If you actually look at the heading, most of the headings in your in the Bibles for chapter 6 says a call for wholehearted commitment. That's what it says in the NLT. A call for wholehearted commitment. What is a wholeheart commitment? Everything you got. Everything you are. And you would say, these people a lot of times would say exactly that. We are wholeheartedly behind you. We get it. We're on board. But we also know the people of God in the Old Testament, right? They also oftentimes spoke out of both sides of their mouths. They were like, yes, we're all for you, but we're actually going to do the opposite. Or they would follow God for like a day, an hour, a month, and then they would say, all right, God, what have you done for us lately? What have you done for me lately? I want to know. And if you're not going to show it to me, if you're not going to prove it to me, then I'm just going to go and do my own thing. Moses is trying to be able to get them to understand what that wholehearted thing looks like, right? And so when you're looking at 6, verses 4 and 5, or 5, he says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Is he missing any aspect of the human body? What is he missing? Yeah, and so we're going to get mind in the New Testament, right? And I think I mentioned this, maybe it was last week or the week, I don't even know. Sometimes it blends together. But we mentioned this and understood that Moses was including the whole body in this, the way that a Hebrew mind would think. The Hebrew scriptures, when it was written for them, when they were reading it, he covered everything. What they would have known about, they would have thought about, right, is the heart, the soul, and the strength would have included everything. That was like everything about you is included there. Now we're saying, but is it a contradiction then when they add mind later on? No. Because then it's a Greek world instead of a Hebrew world. And that's the difference. A Greek world is looking at things philosophically in a different light, in a different mind. And so they're actually saying, let me just add this piece because we don't want you to think that there is a segment of your life that you cannot love God with. You should love God with your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. But we're going to get there. How do we then maintain obedience? How do we maintain obedience when we too are very much like the people of God in the Old Testament? Where we too also say, God, what have you done for me lately? I really need you to show up right here. And then we're looking for God to be able to act the way that we want God to act. We're saying, God, this is what I want you to do for me. Now do it. What's the problem with that? So yeah, it for sure is telling God what to do. And you're like, and then what happens when God doesn't do what you wanted God to do? Right. Then you're saying, God must have not cared about me, loved me, or even was present because he didn't do for me what I wanted him to do. You see, this is where we go back to, and I mention this all the time, is this idea that we want to turn God into a cosmic genie. We do. We want to rub the lamp, and we want to say, let me grant my wish now, because my wish is going to be my command, and this is what I want done from you, God. Right? We turn God into that cosmic genie, or I also look at it this way, a cosmic genie, but also a cosmic vending machine. Like we put in our money, we put the number in, and that's what we expect to come out. That's what we want from God. Exactly what we ask. And we're saying, if God falls short of that, then that's no God at all. But ultimately, what we're actually turning God into is a God of our own making. Not the actual God that's here, that's revealed. We see a God that we're trying to make up in our head that's going to be like us, act like us, behave like us, and give us exactly what we want. That's idolatry. That's not a good thing. And that's not a way to be able to maintain obedience. So when we're looking at this whole thing, like it's hard in a world that's kind of constantly moving, that's surrounded with both joy and tragedy and everything in between, to be able to say, God, how can I be obedient to loving you with all of my heart, all of my soul, all of my mind, all of my strength? It's a hard thing, isn't it? We have this nature that we talked about, this we're like fully, yep, we got sin in our life. We've got rebellion in our life, but we're also saints, redeemed by the blood of Jesus. So we're living in this world and that we have these two things, this what I call paradox, and it's a paradox that will never be broken until we see Jesus face to face. We're going to be struggling with sin, and we're going to be understood that we're fully redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ. But that's the struggle. That's where we're like, how am I going to live? How am I going to be obedient when I've got all this struggle that's happening? And that's where we're going to be. So when we're looking at it, demonstrating, so this first part, kind of that section right there in Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, gives us kind of this summation that says this is how we're going to demonstrate God's love for us, and we're going to love God with our heart, with our soul, our mind, strength, all of that. And what it does is it kind of demonstrates in the commandments. The first 3 commandments, depending on how you break up the table of the law, I understand that. But the first 3 commandments, according to the way that I'm breaking apart the law, the first 3 is the first table of the law, and it has to do with our relationship with God. Now, here's the quiz time. What are the first 3 commandments? Oh, see, you have to go back and say, I think I went through the catechism at some point in time. I think I remember reading this part of the scripture, but I'm trying to remember, what is the first commandment? What? Well, I mean, you could say God first, but you would say 1 through 3 is all God first. You shall have no other gods. There you go. You shall have no other gods. What's 2? And this is the hard one. It depends on where you slice it up. Sometimes people put graven images right here, and they're saying you shall have no other, no graven images. Right? What's 3? 3 might be 3 is usually like universal. What? But yeah, that one was also 2. So because 2 is whether it's in the name of God or graven images, sometimes are blended. 3. Right, you're the name in vain, right? That would be, yeah, so sometimes that would be either 2, right, on there. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Right. So what is the Sabbath day all about? Rest. And it goes back to where? Where was the Sabbath established? Right, Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 at the end, well, actually Genesis chapter 2 at the very start, but Genesis chapter 2 where it says, God says at the end of the 7th day he rested, and that's where Sabbath was introduced. God didn't need rest. He said the Sabbath was for us, not for God. God doesn't need rest, but what he's calling you to is to be able to rest and to be able to lift up the name of God remember the Sabbath day. So these 3 or 4, depending on how you want to slice it up, are all, how do we demonstrate this love of God? We have no other gods. We don't misuse the name of God. We remember the Sabbath day and we keep it holy. These are all ways in which we're demonstrating what it looks like to love God. Now we're going to go to Leviticus chapter 19. Not many times do we go to the book of Leviticus, but today we are. Because Leviticus gives us the continuation of what this is. Leviticus chapter 19, 18. Now this is where it says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite. But here's the continuation, and this is what it says, but love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. So we get these 2, and this is the reason why we are starting in the Old Testament is because what I want you to be able to see is that when Jesus talks about it in the Gospels, he's not just saying, hey, here's a new thing for you. You should love God. They're like, what? I've never heard that before. We should love God? Really? Like, no, like they know it's not a new thing either. So that's what I'm trying to be able to establish for you this morning, is that the Old Testament is not just, hey, it's old, that happened way long, and it did. It did happen long ago. But it's like this continuation. Jesus, when he's in the New Testament, he's saying, let me show you something that's renewed. Let me show you something that God has tried to been to establishing throughout time. So, when we're looking at this, love your neighbor as yourself, that's already in the Old Testament. It wasn't a new thing to love your neighbor. This is when we look at what's called the second table of the law. The second table of the law is what I would then number 4 through 10. Now, we're not going to go through all those because it'll take us too much time. Because ultimately, though, does anybody know what the first commandment on the second table is? So this is the only one this is the only one I'll quiz you on, because it's the most important part of the second table. It starts us off in our relationship with other people. What? No. There you go. Now you're like, honor your father and your mother, and you're like, wait a second. I don't really like my father or mother. Maybe it's that. I don't know. Like, maybe you're saying my father and mother aren't necessarily pointing me in a direction that is good. That's happened. Parents are flawed. Why is this so important for us in our understanding of how to be able to love our neighbor as ourselves? Is because this is the introduction that we have as infants into the world. So when Moses is giving this commandment from God, he's saying this is the first commandment with a promise. Do you remember what the promise is that's attached to this commandment? That you may live long in this land. Right? So what God is trying to establish in the second table is like, it's most important to love God, right? And there's 1 through 3, there's your relationship with God. It's laid out for us. Now, when we're saying, but we also have the command to love one another, to love your neighbor as yourself. And so this commandment becomes difficult because we're saying, I don't really know how to do that. And it should be the part of the structure that we find ourselves in. It says, how do we love our neighbors ourselves? Well, first introduction is through our parent. That's how we're going to learn to even view the world. When your parent says, we're going to love people, and you're like, as a child, you may not know what that looks like or how it's viewed or how it's seen. And they're hopefully, in this good structure, you're going to say, this is how we're going to love each other. I want you to be able to see people as people. I want you to be able to listen to people, to see them instead of ignoring them. So many times I remember, since my daughter's not here today, I can tell stories since she was not here and probably not watching either. Many times this is what would happen. On Sundays, we would do things after church in order to serve people. Sometimes we would go to nursing homes, and we would have like a little bit of a sing-along, read some scripture, and talk about it. So some people called it worship. We just call it like it's a time of gathering. We wanted to be able to, these people in the nursing homes can't leave. Sometimes they have church services that come in to be able to do things, but oftentimes they're left alone. we don't want them to feel neglected, so we would say, hey, let's go and do this. This was all pre-COVID, easy to go in there. You just had to tell them, hey, we're coming, and they say, okay, we'll set up the room for you. Go. It was easy, but here's the thing. We would take our children when they were young. The nursing home, sometimes, especially in memory care units, people can be difficult. They cry. Some of them are carrying babies because they can't remember if they've had an infant, and so they're carrying a baby like this is their child. A lot of them are saying, don't leave me here, take me with you. And my daughter, she's like, what is happening right now? Like they're telling me that I'm their child, and I like they want to go, they want to take me. I'm like, Caitlin, it's fine. We're good. They're not going to take you. We're not going to leave you here. We are trying to be able to bring them something that they don't have. So here's also the problem. What we also did later on. So this was a few years later. Sunday afternoons, we would head out to homeless camps. And there were camps all throughout. And there still is in the city today. Homeless camps all over. What would we do? We would go. The number one goal of our visit was relationship building. Goal number 2 was to be able to bring them something, a lunch, supplies, something that they may need for being outside. That was the goal. But here's the thing also, is that not everybody who's on the street is, like they're not all crazy, but there are some. Sometimes when we're bringing out our children, and they were much, much younger, they were terrified of some people. And we're like, calm down. It's okay. We're loving people who are oftentimes overlooked, looked past. We want to try to love them. You see, there's a part about what we teach along to a next generation of what it means to look at people differently. And I'm not trying to be able to bring these to you to say this is us and our perfect parenting. We too. We're not perfect parents. You can ask my children, they will tell you we were not perfect parents. But here's the thing, what we always tried to be able to do was challenging them to see people differently. And this is where we get our command from. It's not because we thought it was just a good thing. It is a good thing. But it's also an opportunity for us to be able to take the commands of God and to apply them. So now let's look at Jesus. Matthew chapter 22. 37 to 40. And this is where Jesus ultimately takes all of what the Old Testament said, brings it into the New. Jesus replied, "You must love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And a second, listen to this, is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these 2 commandments." Right? Everything that you found in the Old Testament, right? I mean, in all of the Pharisaical 613 laws, all of those that had to deal with both God and people and your work and all kinds of stuff, right? Everything. Jesus is saying the law and the prophets, everything falls under these 2. This is a simplification. This is when we start to see. So all the laws and teachings of the Old Testament are summarized in 2 great commandments. This is Jesus once again making simple what people try to complicate. People try to complicate this all the time. Religious structures become complicated all the time. They're like, well, so here's what you should do. Love God and love people, and make sure you're doing this, and you're like filling the people of God, the church, with all kinds of busy work. We need to keep you busy doing all these things so that you're trying to be able to stay out of trouble or whatever that looks like. And yet Jesus is saying, let me make it simple. This is why Jesus also talked about the yoke. Does everybody know what a yoke is? Yeah? So what is it? Right. It's something that goes around your neck. And where did it go around the neck of? The what? Right, like the ox or whatever you were using to, most likely it was like a plowing system at the time, right? So you'd put this thing on their neck and it was heavy, and then they would kind of walk along and it would create the paths to be able to plant the seed. It was necessary. So when he's using this yoke idea, he's saying, but my yoke is light. It's the reason why he says, those of you who are coming to Jesus, you're coming with a lot of heavy burden. The burden was everything in the Old Testament. They're saying, all of this, let me tell you more. Let me give you more laws. Let me give you more things that you have to do or not do. Let me give you all these, and you've got to try to keep it all straight in your head. Why don't you just memorize it all? That would probably be the best. Memorize it. And you're like, okay, so you'd spend half your life trying to memorize the 613 laws. You're trying to memorize everything that you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to act. And you're like, do I have it right in my head? You see, that's the burden that Jesus is talking about. People are coming with these great burdens upon their back, and he says, let me lighten the load for you. Because my yoke is not like that. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. All right, so what does it look like to truly love God? Truly loving God. Number one, priorities. I was mentioning yesterday that we were going to be talking about priorities today. And I said, what's the priority? Your life is going to already, even if you say, I don't really have a priority system, you do have a priority system. What's going to be the priority system that's currently in your life right now? What does your priorities look like? What does your value structure look like? It's already there, even if you've never developed it. Your priorities are something that we're going to need to look at. Everybody's going to have those values, and what Jesus is trying to be able to put in place is a priority structure that we are going to honor God with. Jesus says that what we need to do with our priorities is to be able to seek God and His kingdom, and everything else will be given to you as well. Seek God and the kingdom of God. Number one, everything else is going to be given to you as well, because God says, I know that you need them. I know that you need food, water, shelter, air. I know that you need them. And then so as he's saying, we take a look at our priorities and we say, this is where I need to start. So as it was mentioned yesterday, it said, so when we look at our priorities, and you're like, somebody comes along and says, hey, I need to do this today, And it means I can't be able to meet, with the church and the people of God. You're like, okay, so your priority system is saying, like, the people of God and worship is always going to be secondary to anything else that comes up. No, God's important in my life. How do we know that God's important? When we make God a priority. And that's where it's like, and this whole thing, and so we're also saying worship is not a place that we go to that we're saying, here's another key indicator of my salvation, right? No. We worship together, we meet together because it's a priority that God has put in front of us, that we're saying, we want to do this. It's a priority to be able to be together. That yes, we get to worship and praise God. But yes, we also are here for one another then. And this is the aspect, I talked about this, I think, last week as well, that in the very beginning when I said, like, why are we here at worship? Yes, to worship and praise God. But it's not just about you and God. Worship is also a place that we gather with one another. And when you say, I don't feel like I need to be present there, you're saying, I don't care about you, fellow brother and sister in Christ. Sounds harsh. This is not a burden. It shouldn't be a burden. It should be saying, God, I love you, and this is what it means when I'm loving you, is I'm looking at my priorities, and I'm trying to be able to put them in a place where I can honor and glorify you, which is number 2. When we are looking at lifting God up through our work, through our everyday movement, we're saying, what does it mean to honor and glorify God? It means that I'm not trying to put myself there to get all the praise. I'm not trying to get my name in lights. I want God's name in lights. We're trying to be able to say it's not about our actions, but we want to be able to do what we can in order to put God in the center. This is how we're loving God. We're striving to keep God's commandments. Now and I put strive for a reason, because we're not striving to keep God's commandments so that God will love us. I want you to know that up front. All these pieces are not us trying to prove our love to God. God already loves us. And as I mentioned before, God loves you so much right now. Like God will never love you any more or any less than he does right now. God loves you deeply, more than anybody else. We are not trying to just please God, but what we are saying is, God, I want to be able to put these things into daily life. I want to be able to try to be able to act in a way as Jesus called me to. I want to be able to hear the things of God and be able to put them into action as I'm living in the world. We strive for that. Yes, we're never going to be perfect in our priorities. We're never going to be perfect in honoring and glorifying God. We're never going to be perfect in keeping all the commandments. Never. But we're saying, God, help me to live the life that you've called me to live. That's what we're trying to work out. And the last one, love other people as yourself. Love other people as yourself. And this can be difficult because people can be difficult. When you're saying this, God's like, love people as you love yourself. Where does that love come from? Where? Yeah, so let's look at the passage. 1 John 4:19. We love each other because God first loved us. Where does love come from? I mean, this is the reason why I like the epistles of John. John, especially in this first letter, 1 John, highlights this over and over again. He talks about the place where love comes from. Love comes from God. God first loved us so that we even know what love looks like. Then we know what it means to love each other. And this is as the followers of Jesus, right? Followers of Jesus, God's love will extend to your relationship with other people so that you can live faithfully in relationship, so that you can forgive others, so that you can be gracious to one another, so that you can be humble. And in humility, never consider yourself better than anybody else. So that you can, and this is where I leave this one for the last one, is you can sacrifice for others. This is what love looked like, right? Remember John, right? 1 John in here talks about love. How do we know what love is? That Jesus died for us. Sacrifice. If we are modeling the same love that God had for us, it should look like sacrifice. And what does sacrifice look like? Giving up something. Yeah. And not just like, hey, like Brussels sprouts, I can give those up. Because I actually do love Brussels sprouts though. But it's just an example. Like we could easily say, like, I can give up something I don't like that much, right? You're like, I can give that up, cool. Like, it's the same thing. I can give up social media. Like, I don't really like social media in the first place. So, like, it's easy for me to be able to say I can give that up. But some other people are like, what does that mean? When we are looking at being able to say, I can sacrifice for the good of someone else, for the good of somebody else, it means I'm not trying to fight for my rights. Do you notice that Jesus never fought for his rights? Never. Like, Jesus never once in the Gospels ever fought for his rights. So when we are looking at it and saying, we need to be able to say, what's it going to look like to sacrifice for others, for their good, not mine. We already have good. God is good. Every blessing, every good thing comes from God. We already have, it's there. So what we are trying to be able to look towards others for is to be able to say, that sacrifice, what does it look like for me to be able to say, I'm going to give this up, these things, so that somebody else will have what they don't have? Those are all good questions to ask. What does sacrifice look like? But here's that question. Do you need to love yourself before you love others? So it does say in there, right? It says, love your neighbor as yourself. And this is where some people think there's the loophole. They're like, wait a second, I don't love myself, so that means I don't have to love people. And this is where I'm going to bring a little bit, I'm going to try to be as loving in this as possible, is that why in the world would you dislike something that God loves so much? Why? God loves you. God showed his love for you in this, that Jesus gave up his life for you. And you're going to say to God, I don't love myself? Why would we not love what God has loved? It's the same way when we are looking at people. Why would we not love somebody that has a fingerprints of God upon them? Why would we not? And so in that flexibility, that understanding where I'm trying to be able to bring to you that yes, we do need to love ourselves, but it's also in the same view as we're looking at somebody else who may be hard to love. We're going to say, you know what, like they're hard to love. They're hard to love. They're hard to love. And you're like, yes, and sometimes I'm also hard to love. And yet God still loved me. We should be working on what it means to love ourselves, because it's going to be really hard to start showing that love to people if we're saying, I don't really love me. We need to be asking that question too. But we're never going to love something that God says here, I have loved you, now love others. All right, quick breakdown. This is kind of the steps. True love's conclusion. What does it mean to have love and to love God and to love people? The first thing we're doing is acknowledging that God is the source of love. We've seen that in the scriptures. We know that God is the source of love. He has loved us, right? Then step 2 says, seek to love God with everything you've got. Your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength, everything that you are. That means we're going to love God with our mind, meaning even the intellect. God's not saying that He wants you to leave your intellect at the door to come and worship. God's saying He wants you to even love Him, even with your intellect, the things that you're thinking, the things that you're processing, science and all of that other wonderful stuff. Don't leave it at the door. Bring it. God says, love me with everything. So seek God. Understand that He's the source. Seek God with everything you've got. Ask Him to help you love others, to take care of them like you care for yourself. And then I just say repeat often. As often as you can, just repeat the process. Again and again and again. Until that day, we see Jesus face to face. So, next steps. What do you need to work on? Is your love for God or that relationship with God, is that the piece that you're like, it's not solid, it's not locked down? Do you need to work on that? Do you need to seek God with everything that you are? But maybe you've got that. You're like, no, I love God. God's good. Like, I have a hard time with people. And you're like, I need to figure out what it means to love people because I have a hard time with people. So what are your next steps? I can't tell you what yours are. I can only process for myself, as you can only process for yourself. But creating a next step says I'm not going to just leave my convictions behind, but I'm going to be able to put them into action. So what are your next steps?